Picture this. You're 8 months pregnant, home alone in your Manhattan penthouse while your husband's on a business trip to Singapore. You discover a hidden camera behind your wedding portrait. Your hands shake as you connect it to your laptop, and what you see destroys everything. Your husband in your bed with another woman while you were in the hospital fighting to save your baby. But here's where it gets truly twisted. That text you receive minutes later isn't an apology. It's from her thanking you for finally finding the cameras because they were getting bored waiting. This isn't just an affair. This is a game, and you've been the target from day one. What would you do if you discovered your entire marriage was a lie? That the father of your unborn child had stolen a dead man's identity? That the woman in your bed is actually his half-sister? And that they've been planning to take your baby and stage your suicide since before you even met? In the next hour, you'll witness Madison Fitzgerald's descent into a nightmare where every ally becomes an enemy, where $50 million in blood money makes her a target for killers, and where the only way to save her daughter is to become more ruthless than the monsters hunting her. This is a story of betrayal so deep it will make you question every relationship you have ever trusted. But it's also a story of a mother's fury, because when they came for her baby, Madison stopped being the victim and became something far more dangerous. If you're ready for a psychological thriller that will leave you checking your own home for hidden cameras, then settle in. And hey, if this story keeps you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps other thriller lovers find these stories. Subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss our next shocking tale. And if you know someone who loves a good twist, share this with them. But maybe wait until after they've checked their locks. The nightmare begins. Now, Madison Fitzgerald stood in her Tribeca penthouse, her 8-month pregnancy bump straining against her designer maternity dress as she stared at the small device in her manicured hand. A hidden camera, no bigger than a button, discovered behind their wedding portrait. "What the hell?" she whispered, her voice echoing through the empty apartment. Ryan was supposed to be in Singapore, closing the Morrison deal. He'd kissed her goodbye 3 days ago, promising to be back before her next prenatal appointment. But something had felt off. Maybe it was the way he'd avoided her eyes, or how quickly he'd pulled away from her embrace. Madison's fingers trembled as she connected the camera to her laptop. The footage loaded slowly, timestamp showing 2 days ago. Her blood ran cold as the image cleared. There was Ryan, very much not in Singapore, leading a woman into their bedroom. The woman was stunning, long blonde hair, a body that belonged on magazine covers. Madison recognized her immediately. Victoria Blake, the Instagram influencer Ryan had introduced as a potential client at last month's charity gala. "No," Madison breathed, but her eyes remained fixed on the screen. She watched in horror as Ryan pulled Victoria onto their bed, the bed where Madison had spent countless nights dealing with pregnancy insomnia, where they'd picked baby names, where she'd cried through her recent miscarriage scare. The timestamp at the bottom made her stomach turn. This was happening while she was in the hospital, terrified she might lose their baby. While she was calling Ryan, leaving tearful voicemails that went unanswered because he was in meetings. Madison's phone rang, startling her. Ryan's face appeared on the screen, a photo from their Hamptons wedding 2 years ago. "Hi, honey." Ryan's voice was warm, casual. "How are you feeling? Baby okay?" Madison's rage was ice cold. "How's Singapore, Ryan?" "Oh, exhausting. These time differences are killing me. It's what, 3 in the morning here?" She almost laughed at the audacity. "Really? Because I found something interesting in our apartment. Several somethings, actually. Small, camera-shaped somethings." Silence stretched between them. Then Ryan sighed. "Madison. I saw the footage, Ryan. I saw you with her. In our bed, while I was in the hospital." "Baby, listen, I can explain." "I'm changing the locks," Madison interrupted, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "My lawyer will contact yours." "Madison, please. I'm getting on the next flight home. We can work through this. Think about our baby." She hung up, immediately blocking his number. Her next call was to James Morrison, the best divorce attorney in Manhattan. Then she called a locksmith, offering triple rates for immediate service. As she waited, Madison found more cameras. In the bathroom, the nursery they'd just finished decorating, even in her home office. The violation felt complete, but she was a Fitzgerald by marriage only. By birth, she was a Winters, and Winters women didn't crumble. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She opened it and nearly dropped the device. A photo of Ryan and Victoria taken an hour ago, according to the metadata. They were at the Hamptons house, their Hamptons house, champagne glasses raised in what looked like a celebration. The message below read, "Thanks for finally finding the cameras. We were getting bored waiting. See you soon. V." Madison's hand went protectively to her belly as the implications crashed over her. This wasn't just an affair. This was something orchestrated, planned, and somehow she'd played right into their hands. Madison's hands shook as she called James Morrison back. "I need more than a divorce lawyer. Something's very wrong here." Within an hour, Morrison had connected her with Jackson Cole, a private investigator with a reputation for handling delicate matters for New York's elite. Madison remembered Jackson. They dated briefly in college before she met Ryan. The reunion was awkward but necessary. "They wanted me to find the cameras," Madison explained, showing Jackson the text. "This is some kind of game to them." But Jackson studied the photo, his jaw tightening. "Madison, I need you to think. Has Ryan been acting differently? Any financial changes? New accounts? Unusual transfers?" The questions triggered a horrible realization. Madison grabbed her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard as she logged into their joint accounts. "No," she gasped. "No, no, no." The accounts were empty, $3.2 million gone, transferred out in increments over the past month, while she'd been focused on baby preparations and bed rest. "I need to check my trust fund," she said, voice hollow. But when she tried to access it, a notification appeared. "Account frozen pending psychiatric evaluation." "What?" Jackson leaned over her shoulder, reading the screen. "Madison, this says Ryan filed for emergency conservatorship, claiming you're experiencing pregnancy-induced psychosis." "That's insane. I'm completely—" Madison stopped mid-sentence as another realization hit. The cameras. He'll edit the footage, make it look like I'm paranoid, unstable. Her phone rang. "Ong, unknown caller." Against Jackson's advice, she answered. "Hello, Madison." The female voice was honeyed poison. "Victoria. Enjoying your evening? What do you want?" "What's already mine? Ryan and I have been planning this for months. Did you really think a man like him would stay with someone so ordinary, so desperate to play house?" Madison's anger flared. "I'm his wife. I'm carrying his child." Victoria's laugh was cruel. "Are you? I mean, have you checked recently? Stress can do terrible things to a pregnancy. Just ask the hospital." The line went dead. Madison immediately called her doctor, but the office was closed. She tried the hospital directly, but they wouldn't release information over the phone. "We need to go to the police," Jackson said. But when they arrived at the precinct, Madison discovered Ryan had already been there. Detective Jennifer Mitchell, a stern woman with calculating eyes, listened to Madison's story with obvious skepticism. "Mrs. Fitzgerald, your husband showed us concerning videos. You destroying property, making threats. He's worried about your mental state." "Those videos are edited. I can prove I. Additionally," Detective Mitchell continued, "he mentioned you've been having delusions about affairs, seeing things that aren't there. Given your condition—" "I'm not delusional." Madison's voice rose and she saw Jackson wince. She was playing into their narrative. Detective Mitchell's expression softened with false sympathy. "Why don't you go home? Get some rest. If you have evidence of actual crimes, bring it tomorrow." Outside the precinct, Madison felt the walls closing in. "They've thought of everything." "Not everything," Jackson said quietly. "I've been investigating Ryan for another client. There are things about him you don't know." Before Madison could respond, her phone buzzed. A video message from Ryan. She played it against her better judgment. Ryan appeared on screen, sitting in what looked like their Hamptons bedroom. But it was his words that made Madison's blood freeze. "If you're watching this, you've probably noticed the money's gone. Don't bother looking for it. But here's what you're going to do. You're going to check yourself into Peaceful Gardens, that nice psychiatric facility upstate. You're going to sign papers admitting you're unfit to care for our child. And you're going to give me full custody when it's born. If you don't, well, the videos I have will ensure you're committed anyway. Your choice, Madison. The easy way or the hard way. The screen went dark, and Madison felt her carefully constructed world collapsing around her, one calculated blow at a time. Madison refused to crumble. The next morning, she met Jackson at a small cafe in Brooklyn, far from her usual haunts. He'd spent the night digging into Ryan's past. "Your husband isn't who he says he is," Jackson began, sliding a folder across the table. "Ryan Fitzgerald technically doesn't exist before 2010. The real Ryan Fitzgerald died in a car accident in 2009. Madison's coffee cup clattered against the saucer. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your husband stole a dead man's identity. His real name is Ryan Blake. And Victoria, she's not just his mistress." The revelation hung between them like a loaded gun. Madison opened the folder with trembling fingers, scanning documents, birth certificates, DNA test results Jackson had somehow obtained. "She's his half-sister," Madison whispered, nausea rising. "Oh God, I'm going to be sick." She barely made it to the restroom. When she returned, pale and shaking, Jackson was on his phone, speaking urgently. He hung up as she approached. "We need to leave, now. Ryan just filed a missing person report, claiming you're dangerous to yourself and the baby." They rushed toward Jackson's car, but Madison suddenly doubled over in pain. "Something's wrong," she gasped. Warm fluid soaked through her dress. "My water just broke. It's too early." "Hospital," Jackson said, helping her into the car. "No, they'll call Ryan. He has power of attorney." Madison, the baby, another contraction ripped through her. They had no choice. The ride to Mount Sinai was a blur of pain and panic. Jackson called ahead using a fake name, but it didn't matter. Ryan was already there when they arrived, playing the concerned husband perfectly. "My poor darling," he cooed, reaching for Madison as nurses wheeled her toward delivery. "You've been under such stress. Don't worry, I'm here now." "Get away from me," Madison screamed, but another contraction stole her breath. The medical staff exchanged glances. To them, she looked exactly like what Ryan had described, a hysterical pregnant woman in crisis. Hours passed in a haze of pain and medication. Madison fought to stay conscious, terrified of what might happen if she went under. But eventually, exhaustion won. She woke to silence. No crying, no baby. "Where is my baby?" she croaked, throat raw. Ryan sat beside her bed, eyes red-rimmed with fake tears. "I'm so sorry, Madison. There were complications, the stress, your condition. Our daughter didn't make it." "No." The word was barely a whisper. "You're lying." "The doctors did everything they could." That's when she heard it, faint but unmistakable. A baby crying somewhere down the hall. "That's my baby." Madison tried to sit up, but found herself restrained. "Why am I restrained?" "For your own safety," Ryan said smoothly. "You became violent. You tried to attack the staff." "That's not true, Jackson. Where's Jackson?" Ryan's smile was cold. "Mr. Cole left. Said he couldn't help someone so clearly disturbed. But don't worry, I'm having you transferred to a wonderful facility." Madison screamed then, long and loud, until nurses rushed in with sedatives. The last thing she saw was Ryan's satisfied smile as darkness claimed her. She woke again during transport. The ambulance was moving fast, too fast. Through her medicated haze, she heard the driver arguing with someone on the radio. "I don't care what he's paying. This is kidnapping." A struggle. The vehicle swerved violently. Madison, strapped to a gurney, could only watch as the ambulance careened off the road, flipping twice before landing in a ditch. When she came to, Jackson was pulling her from the wreckage. "Can you walk? We need to move." "The drivers, they're okay. Called for help. But we need to go before Ryan realizes you're not at the facility." Madison let him lead her to a waiting car, mind reeling. "You didn't abandon me?" "I had to make Ryan think I did. It was the only way to get close enough to intercept the transport." "My baby, I heard her crying." "She's alive," Jackson confirmed, speeding toward the highway. "Ryan has her at a private residence. We're going to get her back. But first, we need to keep you safe." As the city lights faded behind them, Madison allowed herself a moment of hope. She was free. She had an ally, and her daughter was alive. But in her pocket, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. She looked at the screen, and her blood ran cold. A photo of Jackson and Victoria dated 3 weeks ago. They were sitting together at a restaurant, leaning close, intimate. The caption read, "Thanks for delivering her right to us, V." Madison looked at Jackson, who was focused on driving, and realized with dawning horror that she'd escaped one trap only to fall into another. Madison kept her breathing steady, phone hidden in her lap. She couldn't let Jackson know she'd seen the photo. Not yet. Not until she understood the full scope of this nightmare. "Where are we going?" she asked, voice carefully neutral. "My cabin upstate. It's off the grid. Ryan won't find us there." Jackson glanced at her, concern creasing his features. "You okay? You look pale." "Just processing everything." She forced a weak smile. "Jackson, how did you know about the transport? The exact route?" His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I've been tracking Ryan's communications. Had to hack a few systems. Technically illegal, but you did it for me." She studied his profile. "Just like old times, right? You always were protective." He smiled, relaxing slightly. "You deserve better than him, Madison. You always did." They drove in silence for 20 minutes before Madison spoke again. "Can we stop? I need to use a restroom, maybe get some water. There's a gas station coming up." At the station, Madison locked herself in the bathroom and finally allowed herself to break down. "Think," she commanded herself. "Jackson's involved, but how deep? And what does Victoria want?" She studied the photo again, zooming in. There, on the table between them. Documents. She enhanced further, grateful for her phone's advanced camera capabilities. One word was visible: adoption. Her heart stopped. They weren't just planning to take her baby. They were planning to legally adopt her, probably after Madison's convenient suicide at whatever isolated location Jackson was driving her to. Madison splashed water on her face and returned to the car. Jackson had bought her water and crackers, playing the concerned friend perfectly. "The cabin's about an hour away," he said as they resumed driving. "You'll be safe there while we figure out our next move." "Our next move," Madison repeated. "Jackson, I need you to be honest with me. Have you been in contact with Victoria?" His pause was a fraction too long. "Why would you ask that?" She pulled out her phone, showing him the photo. "Because of this." The car swerved slightly before Jackson regained control. "Madison, I can explain." "Pull over. Let me pull over now or I start screaming, and don't stop until someone calls the cops." Jackson pulled onto the shoulder. When he turned to face her, his expression had changed. The mask of concern replaced by something harder, calculating. "It's not what you think," he began. "Then explain. Quickly." Jackson ran a hand through his hair. "Victoria approached me 3 weeks ago, said she had information about Ryan that could help you in the divorce. I thought I was playing her, getting intel. But she knew exactly who I was, knew about our history. She offered me something I couldn't refuse." Madison's stomach turned. "Money, eh?" "Not money," his voice dropped. "You." "What?" "She said if I help them get you away from Ryan, really away, permanently away me, then after a suitable time, you and I could be together, raise the baby together." She painted this picture of our future. And God help me, Madison, I wanted it. The confession hung between them like a physical presence. Madison felt rage building, cold and clarifying. "So you were going to let them kill me?" "No," Jackson grabbed her hand. She yanked it away. "The plan was never to hurt you, just to contain you until you signed the papers. Then Victoria promised she'd convince Ryan to let you go, set you up somewhere nice. Maybe Europe." Madison laughed, sharp and bitter. "And you believed her?" "Jackson, they're planning to kill me. That was always the plan." "You don't know that. I know Ryan. And apparently I never knew you at all." She reached for the door handle. Jackson hit the locks. "Madison, please. I'm trying to protect you." "By driving me to an isolated cabin where no one knows my location?" She pulled out her phone. "Unlock the door or I call 911 right now." "You don't understand. If you run now, they'll find you. Victoria has people everywhere. The only reason you're alive is because I convinced them I could deliver you quietly." Then we're at an impasse. Madison met his eyes. Because I'm not going to that cabin. Jackson's phone rang before he could respond. Victoria's name appeared on the screen. He answered on speaker. No point in pretending anymore. Jackson, darling, Victoria's voice purred. How's our precious cargo? There's been a complication, Jackson said carefully. Oh? Don't tell me she's being difficult. You promised you could handle her. Madison grabbed the phone. Victoria, let's cut the crap. What do you want? A delighted laugh. Madison, so nice to hear you're conscious. What I want is simple. Sign over custody of that baby, commit yourself voluntarily for psychiatric treatment, and disappear. Everyone wins. Everyone except me and my daughter. Your daughter will have a wonderful life. Two parents who actually want her, all the advantages money can provide. Two parents who are biological siblings, Madison spat. The silence that followed was deafening. When Victoria spoke again, her voice was ice. Jackson, bring her to the cabin now, or the deal's off and you'll join her in whatever tragedy befalls her. The line went dead. Jackson and Madison stared at each other across the chasm of betrayal and desperation. Drive, Madison said quietly, but not to the cabin, to the FBI field office in Albany. Madison, it's your only play, Jackson. Turn state's evidence. It's that or become an accessory to murder. Jackson sat frozen for a long moment. Then slowly he started the car and pulled back onto the highway, heading north. Whether towards salvation or damnation, Madison couldn't yet tell. The FBI field office came into view just as Madison's phone exploded with notifications. Videos were being uploaded, dumped to social media from her accounts. Videos she'd never taken. Oh God, she breathed, watching herself on screen, apparently drunk, ranting about wanting to hurt Ryan, about not wanting the baby. The deepfake technology was flawless. Jackson pulled into the parking lot. Madison, if we go in there now with those videos, they'll think I'm exactly what Ryan says I am. She felt trapped, cornered. We need proof, real proof. The adoption documents, Jackson said suddenly. Victoria showed me copies. They're at the cabin, but not the one I was supposed to take you to. She has her own place, about 15 miles from mine. Madison weighed her options. Walking into the FBI empty-handed would end with her committed. But going anywhere with Jackson, you can drive, she said finally, but I'm recording everything. Audio, video, all of it uploads to the cloud in real time. If anything happens to me, nothing will happen to you, Jackson's voice was raw. Madison, I know I betrayed you, but I swear on whatever's left of my soul, I won't let them hurt you. They drove to Victoria's cabin as the sun set, casting long shadows through the pine trees. The place was isolated, beautiful in a way that made Madison's skin crawl. Too perfect, like a fairy tale cottage hiding something dark. She's not here, Jackson noted, checking his phone. According to her Instagram, she's at some influencer event in the city. They entered through a back window Jackson jimmied open. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly modern, all clean lines and expensive furniture. Madison went straight to the office while Jackson kept watch. The documents were easy to find. Victoria hadn't bothered hiding them. As Madison photographed each page, the full horror of the plan emerged. Not just adoption papers, but forged psychiatric evaluations, fake suicide notes in Madison's handwriting, even a will leaving everything to Ryan and the baby. Madison, Jackson called urgently, you need to see this. In the bedroom, he'd found photo albums, dozens of them dating back years, photos of Ryan and Victoria together, intimate, undeniable, but it was the dates that made Madison's head spin. These go back to when Victoria was 15, she whispered. Ryan would have been 21. There's more. Jackson showed her a leather journal, Victoria's handwriting filling every page. Madison read with growing nausea. The entries detailed everything. How Victoria had discovered Ryan was her half-brother when she was 17. How instead of being repulsed, she'd been thrilled. She wrote about their father, William Blake, the wealthy businessman who'd hidden his affair child, who'd paid for Victoria's silence. One entry made Madison's blood freeze. Daddy threatened to cut us both off if we didn't stop. Ryan said we should wait, be smart, marry other people first, establish ourselves. Then, when Daddy's gone, we can be together properly. I hate waiting, but Ryan's right. We need his money. And Madison's so pathetically eager to be loved, she'll never see it coming. The date on this, Jackson said, pointing. This is from before you even met Ryan. Madison, you were targeted from the beginning. Madison photographed everything, her phone uploading automatically. There's something else here about their father, about him dying. She found the entry, dated 6 months ago. It's done, Daddy's gone. The morphine in his scotch worked perfectly. Everyone thinks it was his heart. Ryan played the grieving son beautifully. Now we just need to get rid of Madison, and the baby will be ours to raise properly. Our child, even if she doesn't know it. They killed him, Madison breathed. They murdered their own father. A door slammed. They both froze. Well, well, and so on. Victoria's voice drifted up the stairs. Breaking and entering Madison, that's not very stable behavior. Footsteps on the stairs. Madison grabbed the journal, shoving it into her bag. Jackson, darling, Victoria appeared in the doorway, stunning in a black cocktail dress. You were supposed to take her to your cabin. Plans changed, Jackson said, moving protectively in front of Madison. Victoria laughed. How sweet. The white knight routine. Oh, tell me, Madison, did he confess his part in all this? How he was going to keep you sedated while we handled the legal matters? He told me everything, Madison said, stepping out from behind Jackson. Just like you told your journal everything, including how you murdered your father. Victoria's smile faltered for just a moment. What journal? Madison held it up. This one, already uploaded to the cloud, along with photos of every document in this room. You're lying. Madison showed her the phone screen, the upload confirmation clear. FBI, New York Times, CNN, they all have copies now. It's over, Victoria. Victoria's beautiful face contorted with rage. You stupid little... She lunged forward, but Jackson caught her wrist. Don't, he warned. Victoria wrenched free, pulling out her phone. Bye. Ryan, get here now. Bring the baby. Madison's heart stopped. You said the baby was at a private residence. Did I? Victoria smirked. She's been with her daddy this whole time. Would you like to see her? 20 minutes later, headlights flooded the cabin. Ryan entered carrying a baby carrier, his face dark with fury when he saw Madison. You couldn't just disappear quietly, he snarled. Madison's eyes were locked on the carrier. The baby inside was perfect, beautiful with a shock of dark hair just like hers. Her daughter. Alive. Give me my baby, she said, voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. Our baby, Ryan corrected. Though technically, he looked at Victoria with such naked adoration it made Madison sick. She's really ours, isn't she, love? The journal, Victoria said urgently. She has it, and she's uploaded. Ryan's face went white. What journal? The one where your sister details your incestuous relationship and how you murdered your father, Madison said clearly, her phone still recording. The one that's already been sent to law enforcement. Ryan set the carrier down carefully, then advanced on Madison. You have no idea what you've done. I've ended this sick game. You've killed us all. Ryan grabbed at Madison's shoulders. Do you know who our father really was? What connections he had? When they find out what we did? Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. They all froze. I called them, Jackson said quietly. When I went to keep watch, I called them. Victoria screamed in rage, launching herself at him. Ryan released Madison, trying to pull Victoria off Jackson. In the chaos, Madison grabbed the baby carrier and ran. Behind her, the cabin erupted in shouts and crashes. She reached her phone, calling 911, giving their exact location. The sirens were almost there. The baby started crying, the most beautiful sound Madison had ever heard. She held her daughter close, whispering promises of safety and love as police cars surrounded the cabin. Detective Jennifer Mitchell was first through the door, weapon drawn. The scene inside was chaos. Jackson bloodied but standing, Ryan trying to restrain a hysterical Victoria. Nobody move, Mitchell commanded. It was over. Finally, impossibly, it was over. The interrogation room at the Albany FBI field office was cold and sterile. Madison sat with her daughter, finally, legally, officially hers, sleeping in her arms while Agent Patricia Coleman reviewed the evidence. Mrs. Fitzgerald, What you've uncovered goes deeper than a murder and custody dispute, Coleman said, sliding photos across the table. William Blake, your late father-in-law, was connected to organized crime, money laundering specifically. Madison stared at the surveillance photos of William with known crime figures. Ryan knew? Based on Victoria's journal and Ryan's financial records, they both knew. In fact, they were planning to take over his operation. Your husband isn't just the identity thief, Mrs. Fitzgerald. He's been preparing to inherit a criminal empire. The door opened and Detective Mitchell entered, her expression grim. Jackson Cole is ready to make a full statement. He's asking to see you first. Madison hesitated, then handed her daughter to the waiting FBI child specialist. In the adjacent room, Jackson looked smaller, defeated. His face was bruised from Victoria's attack. I need you to know something, he said immediately. The cabin, my cabin. There's a safe. Combination is your birthday. Inside is everything I gathered on Ryan before Victoria approached me. I was investigating him for another reason. What reason? My sister. She killed herself 2 years ago after a relationship with a married man who destroyed her financially and emotionally. That man was Ryan. Madison sank into the chair across from him. You were using me for revenge? At first, maybe. But Madison, I fell back in love with you the moment you walked into that cafe. Everything got complicated after that. Love? Madison laughed bitterly. You were going to let them kill me. No, I was going to double-cross them. The cabin has cameras everywhere. I was going to record them confessing, then turn everything over to the FBI. I just needed them to trust me first. I don't believe you. Jackson pulled out his phone, showing her an email draft dated the day before, addressed to the FBI detailing the entire plot. I never sent it because you found out first, but I was never going to let them hurt you. Before Madison could respond, Coleman burst in. We have a problem. Ryan's lawyer is here, and he's brought documents suggesting you're an unfit mother. He's filing for emergency custody. Madison stood. That's impossible. He's under arrest for murder. He's claiming Victoria acted alone, that he's been trying to protect the baby from both of you, the unstable wife and the delusional sister. The hits just kept coming. Madison returned to find her daughter gone from the specialist's arms. Where is she? Madison demanded. Child Protective Services, Coleman said apologetically. Just temporarily until a judge reviews. No, Madison felt her world tilting. You can't take her. It's just for tonight. Tomorrow morning, there's an emergency hearing. With everything you've provided, you should get her back immediately. Should wasn't good enough. That night, Madison stayed in a hotel near the courthouse, unable to sleep. She reviewed everything on her phone, all the evidence, all the proof. At 3 a.m., a text arrived from an unknown number. Check the news. V. Madison turned on the television. Breaking news scrolled across the screen. Instagram influencer Victoria Blake claims pregnancy by brother in shocking jailhouse interview. The reporter was breathless with scandal. Blake alleges she's carrying her half-brother's child and that Madison Fitzgerald orchestrated an elaborate frame job out of jealousy. She's provided what she claims is proof of Mrs. Fitzgerald's mental instability. Madison watched in horror as fabricated medical records appeared on screen. Fake therapy sessions where she supposedly admitted to hallucinations, to wanting to hurt her baby. Her phone rang. Her lawyer. Don't panic, he said immediately. It's all fake. We can prove it's fake. But Madison, there's something else. Ryan's out on bail. What? How? His family's connections. Old money, old favors. He's not supposed to come near you, but a knock at the hotel door. Madison froze. Madison? Ryan's voice muffled through the door. Please, I just want to talk about our daughter. Madison grabbed her phone, calling 911, but Ryan spoke again. I have a proposition, one that ensures you get our daughter back tomorrow. All you have to do is open the door. Against every instinct, Madison approached the door, looking through the peephole. Ryan stood there alone, holding a folder. What do you want? She called through the door. To make a deal. Victoria's lost it, Madison. She's destroying everything with her interview. I'll testify against her, confirm she killed my father alone, that she's delusional about us being together. In exchange, we share custody. 50-50. Our daughter needs both parents. You're insane. The journal entries about us being together, I'll say she fabricated them, living out some sick fantasy. My lawyers already planted doubt about their authenticity. Without my confirmation, you have no proof of the relationship. Madison's mind raced. And if I refuse, then I'll back Victoria's story. Say you knew about her obsession with me and used it to frame us both. My family's lawyers will bury you in legal battles for years. You'll be lucky to get supervised visitation by the time they're done. You won't get away with this. I already have. Open the door, Madison. Let's discuss this like civilized people. She heard sirens in the distance. Her 911 call had been answered. Ryan heard them too. You have until tomorrow morning to decide, he said, footsteps retreating. Your daughter or your revenge. Choose wisely. Madison slumped against the door. Even now, even with everything exposed, Ryan was still 3 steps ahead. The game wasn't over. It had only changed. The courtroom was packed with media the next morning. Madison sat with her legal team, trying to ignore the cameras and whispers. Across the aisle, Ryan looked immaculate in his tailored suit, his lawyers flanking him like bodyguards. Victoria was brought in wearing orange, her Instagram perfect image destroyed. She caught Madison's eye and mouthed something that looked like, "Watch this." Judge Catherine Wells, a stern woman with 30 years on the bench, called for order. This emergency hearing concerns the custody of baby girl Fitzgerald, currently in protective custody. I've reviewed the evidence submitted by both parties, and I have to say, in my 30 years, I've never seen anything quite like this. Ryan's lead attorney, Harold Morrison, stood. Your Honor, my client has been the victim of an elaborate conspiracy between his mentally ill wife and his delusional half-sister. We have evidence that Mrs. Fitzgerald has been planning this false accusation for months. Objection, Madison's lawyer, David Chen, interrupted. The evidence clearly shows. I'll review the evidence myself, Counselor. Judge Wells pulled up the first document. Let's start with this journal. For 2 hours, both sides presented their cases. Ryan was convincing, playing the concerned father caught between 2 unstable women. He presented text messages, supposedly from Madison to Victoria, planning the frame job. Madison knew they were fake, but they looked real. Then Victoria was called to testify via video link from jail. She looked directly at the camera. Everything in that journal is true, she said clearly. Ryan and I have been together since I was 17. We killed our father together. And that baby? She should be mine and Ryan's to raise. The courtroom erupted. Ryan jumped to his feet. She's lying. She's obsessed. Mr. Fitzgerald, sit down, Judge Wells commanded. She turned to Victoria. Miss Blake, you're under oath. Are you saying you and your half-brother have been in an incestuous relationship? Yes, Victoria smiled, and I can prove it. She held up a pregnancy test to the camera. I'm carrying his child right now. A DNA test will prove it. Ryan knew I was pregnant before Madison delivered. He promised we'd raise both babies together. Ryan's face had gone ashen. This is insane, Your Honor. She's clearly... I have videos, Victoria continued, hidden camera footage from our encounters. Everything's been uploaded to a secure server. The passwords are in my lawyer's possession. Madison watched Ryan crumble in real time. His lawyers were frantically whispering, trying to form a strategy, but there was no spinning this. Judge Wells looked disgusted. Miss Blake, you realize you're confessing to multiple crimes? I don't care anymore, Victoria said, and for the first time she looked genuinely broken. Ryan promised me everything, a life together, children, freedom from hiding. But the moment things got complicated, he chose his image over me, just like our father did. Your Honor, Chen stood. Given this testimony, we move for immediate full custody to be granted to my client. Not so fast, Morrison interrupted. Even if these allegations are true, Mrs. Fitzgerald's mental state is perfectly sound, a new voice said from the gallery. Everyone turned. Jackson Cole stood, holding a tablet. Your Honor, I'm Jackson Cole, private investigator. I have time-stamped footage from my cabin showing Ryan and Victoria discussing their plans to frame Mrs. Fitzgerald, drug her, and fake her suicide. I also have recordings of Ryan admitting to his father's murder. Judge Wells's gavel struck hard. Approach, now. The next 30 minutes were chaos. Jackson's footage was reviewed. Victoria's videos were confirmed to exist, and Ryan's carefully constructed defense fell apart completely. Finally, Judge Wells spoke. Mr. Fitzgerald, you're remanded into custody pending additional charges. Mrs. Fitzgerald, full custody is granted to you immediately. CPS will deliver your daughter within the hour. Madison sobbed with relief, but Ryan wasn't done. As officers approached to cuff him, he lunged toward Madison. You destroyed everything, he screamed. That baby should have been our legacy. Security tackled him before he could reach her. As they dragged him out, he was still screaming about his ruined empire, his perfect plans. Victoria watched it all with dead eyes. As they led her away, she stopped near Madison. Take care of her, she said quietly. She's innocent in all this. Madison found herself nodding, unable to hate the broken woman despite everything. An hour later, Madison held her daughter, Emma, she'd decided, in the courthouse lobby. Jackson stood nearby, uncertain. Thank you, Madison said simply, for the recordings. I meant what I said. I was never going to let them hurt you. Madison studied him for a long moment. I know, but Jackson, we can't go back. Too much has happened. He nodded, understanding. What will you do now? Disappear for a while. Emma and I need time to heal away from all of this. Madison, there's something else. Ryan's father's associates, they'll come looking for answers about the money, the operation. The FBI is handling it, Madison said. Coleman promised protection. Jackson pulled out a card. If you ever need anything, even just to know someone's watching your back. Madison took it, then surprised them both by hugging him briefly. Take care of yourself, Jackson. As she walked away with Emma, Madison felt the weight of the past months lifting. It wasn't a happy ending, too much damage, too much betrayal for that. But it was an ending, and more importantly, a beginning. 2 months later, Madison sat in a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, far from New York's shadow. Emma dozed in her stroller while Madison read the news on her tablet. Blake Fitzgerald trial continues to shock nation, the headline read. The trial had become a media circus. Victoria had pled guilty to murder and conspiracy, getting 25 to life. Ryan was fighting everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. Madison Winters? Madison looked up sharply. A woman stood there, professionally dressed, unfamiliar. Relax, I'm Agent Sarah Foster, FBI. Coleman sent me. She showed her badge discreetly. We need to talk about William Blake's associates. Madison's stomach dropped. I thought that was handled. It was, but we've discovered something in the financial records. Your husband, ex-husband, hid approximately $50 million. We can't find it. Neither can Blake's former partners. I don't know anything about that. Foster studied her. Mrs. Winters, these people don't care what you know. They care what they think you know. There's been chatter. They think you have the money. That's insane. Is it? You exposed the entire conspiracy. You had access to all of Ryan's computers, passwords. From their perspective, you're the only one who could have taken it. Madison's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, a photo of the coffee shop taken from across the street. Her blood ran cold. We need to move, Foster said, seeing Madison's face. Now. They left quickly, Foster leading them to a waiting SUV. As they drove, Madison's mind raced. $50 million, hidden somewhere by Ryan, now making her a target. Where are we going? Madison asked. Safe house. You'll need to stay there until we resolve this. Emma started crying. Madison soothed her, thinking about the life she'd planned. Quiet, anonymous, safe. Now that was shattered too. At the safe house, Foster set up security while Madison fed Emma. Her phone, now being monitored by the FBI, received another message. You have something that belongs to us. Return it or lose everything. You have 48 hours. They're escalating quickly, Foster noted. Mrs. Winters, I need you to think. Did Ryan ever mention Switzerland, the Cayman Islands? Any offshore accounts you haven't told us about? No, Madison stopped. Something Victoria had said during one of her jailhouse interviews, something about Ryan's contingency plans. Wait, Victoria mentioned a safety deposit box. Said Ryan told her it was insurance if everything went wrong. Foster leaned forward. Where? She didn't say, but she said he called it Emma's college fund. Foster immediately got on her phone, barking orders to search every bank Ryan had used. Within hours, they found it, a safety deposit box at a small bank in Connecticut, under the name Emma Blake. "We need you to open it," Foster said. "It's registered to you as Emma's guardian." "That's impossible. I never—" Madison stopped. Ryan had her sign so many papers during the pregnancy, supposedly for insurance and benefits. He must have slipped it in. They drove through the night, Emma sleeping in her car seat. At the bank, Madison's hands shook as she signed the forms. Inside the box were drives, documents, and a letter addressed to her. She opened it with trembling fingers. "Madison, if you're reading this, everything went wrong. The drives contain all of Father's records, his contacts, his debts, his leverage. The people looking for this will kill you once they have it. Don't give it to them. Don't give it to the FBI either. They'll use you as bait, disappear, use the account information below. Yes, I hid money, but not for me. For Emma. For you, if you were smart enough to find this. I know you hate me. I deserve it. But Emma doesn't deserve to pay for our sins. Don't let them find you." Madison looked at Foster, who was reading over her shoulder. $50 million, Foster breathed. Account numbers, passwords, everything. "It's Emma's," Madison said firmly. "It's evidence, and leverage against some very dangerous people." Madison thought about her daughter's future, about always running, always hiding. Then she made a decision that surprised even her. "Then let's use it. Set a trap. End this." Foster stared at her. "Mrs. Winters, these aren't just criminals. They're connected, international. And they'll never stop coming for us unless we stop them first." Madison stood, Emma in her arms. "I'm tired of being the victim. Let's finish this." Foster slowly smiled. "Coleman said you were tougher than you looked. All right, let's take down a criminal empire." As they left the bank, Madison felt a strange sense of power. She'd been played, manipulated, nearly destroyed. But she'd survived. And now, with $50 million in FBI backing, she was going to ensure Emma never had to look over her shoulder. The game wasn't over, but Madison was no longer just a player. She was the one holding all the cards. The warehouse in Newark looked abandoned from the outside, but Madison knew better. Inside, FBI agents were positioned at every exit, every window. She stood in the center, Emma safe with witness protection 2 states away, waiting for the criminals who thought she was just another desperate mother. The $50 million was real. She transferred it to the account they specified. But Foster's team had marked every digital dollar, ready to trace it the moment it moved. "They're here," Foster's voice crackled through Madison's earpiece. 3 men entered, expensive suits barely concealing their weapons. The leader, Anthony Castellano, had worked with William Blake for 2 decades. "Mrs. Fitzgerald," he said smoothly, "you're smarter than your husband. Ex-husband, and it's Winters. Of course, you have something that belongs to us. The money's been transferred. Check your accounts." Castellano nodded to one of his men, who pulled out a phone. After a moment, he nodded. "See?" Madison said. "Now leave me alone." "Not quite that simple." Castellano stepped closer. "You've seen the records. You know our names, our operations. That makes you a liability." Madison's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "The FBI has everything. Killing me won't change that." "The FBI?" Castellano laughed. "You think we're worried about the FBI? Half of them are on our payroll." "Not these ones," Foster said, stepping out of the shadows with a dozen agents, weapons drawn. "Anthony Castellano, you're under arrest." Castellano's face went cold. "You set us up." "No," Madison said. "You set yourselves up the day you decided to threaten my daughter." The arrest happened quickly, efficiently. Castellano and his men were cuffed and led away, but not before he looked back at Madison. "You have no idea what you've started, little girl. We have friends everywhere." After they were gone, Foster approached Madison. "You did great, but he's not wrong. This is just the beginning." "Then we keep going," Madison said. "Use the records. Take them all down." "That could take years. You'd have to testify, be in witness protection." "No." Madison pulled out a drive she'd hidden. "This is everything, but I'm not testifying. I'm disappearing." Foster frowned. "Madison, The FBI gets the records, the criminals get prosecuted, and Emma and I vanish. That's the deal. The department won't agree to that, Madison smiled. They will when they see what else is on that drive. You're half of the FBI that's on their payroll? I have names. Foster went very still. You are playing a dangerous game. I learned it from the best. Madison handed over the drive. Emma and I disappeared tonight. New identities, new life. If anyone comes looking, if anyone threatens us, everything goes public. Foster took the drive, understanding the implications. Madison had just guaranteed her daughter's safety by holding a nuclear option over everyone's heads. That night, Madison stood in a modest apartment in Vancouver, watching Emma sleep in her crib. Their new names were simple, unremarkable. Their new life would be quiet. Her phone, her old phone, the one she'd keep just for this, buzzed with a news alert. Major crime syndicate dismantled in FBI raid, 47 arrests made. Then another. Ryan Fitzgerald found dead in prison cell. Apparent suicide. Madison felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sorrow. Ryan had chosen his path. A final message appeared from Jackson. Saw the news. Hope you're safe. Hope you are happy. Jay. She deleted the message, then destroyed the phone. That life was over. Looking at Emma, Madison made a promise. Her daughter would grow up free from the shadows of the past, never knowing about the empire of lies she'd been born into. The morning sun broke through the windows, painting the room gold. Somewhere out there, Victoria was serving her sentence. The FBI was processing dozens of arrests, and the media was having a field day with the story. But here, in this quiet apartment, a mother sang softly to her daughter, finally free from the nightmare that had nearly destroyed them both. 5 years later, Madison, now Sarah Coleman, watched Emma play in the park, her dark hair shining in the afternoon sun. Vancouver had been good to them. The coffee shop she managed provided enough income, and no one asked questions about her past. "Mommy, watch," Emma called, pumping her legs on the swing. "I'm watching, sweetheart." Her phone buzzed. After 5 years, she still tensed at unexpected calls. But it was just her assistant manager asking about tomorrow's schedule. Life had become beautifully ordinary. Emma attended preschool, made friends, had play dates. Madison had even gone on a few dates, though nothing serious. Trust came hard after everything. "Ms. Coleman?" Madison turned to find a well-dressed woman approaching. Her hand instinctively moved to her pocket where she kept pepper spray. "Yes?" "I'm Patricia Morse, attorney with Morse and Associates." She handed Madison a card. "I'm here about an inheritance." Madison's blood chilled. "I think you have the wrong person." "Sarah Coleman, formerly Madison Winters, formerly Madison Fitzgerald?" Madison grabbed Emma's hand. "We're leaving." "Wait, please." Victoria Blake passed away 3 months ago. Complications from her pregnancy years ago. She never fully recovered. She left something for your daughter. Madison stopped. "Victoria's dead, also?" "Yes, in her will she left a letter, only for you and Emma. No money, nothing traceable, just words." Against her better judgment, Madison took the envelope. That night, after Emma was asleep, she opened it. "Madison, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. The baby died during birth. Perhaps it's better that way. Some bloodlines shouldn't continue. I've thought about you and Emma every day. The child who should have been mine to raise, now free from the poison of our family. You saved her, Madison. You saved her from becoming what Ryan and I became. I know you'll never forgive me. I don't forgive myself. But I need you to know that in my twisted way, I loved Ryan. And that love destroyed everything it touched. Don't let Emma grow up not knowing love because of what we did. Don't let our sins make her afraid to trust, to feel, to live fully. Tell her she had an aunt who made terrible choices but who hopes she'll make better ones. Tell her she comes from survivors, not just victims. Live well, Madison. Both of you. Victoria. Madison burned the letter, watching the words turn to ash. But something in her chest, some knot she'd carried for 5 years, loosened just a little. The next morning, Emma asked, "Mommy, why don't I have a daddy like other kids?" Madison had prepared for this question. "Some families are different, sweetheart. We have each other, and that's enough. But did I have a daddy before?" Madison knelt down, looking into her daughter's eyes, Ryan's eyes, but innocent, untainted. You did, but he had to go away. He made some bad choices and couldn't be with us. Was he bad? Madison thought about it. He was complicated. People aren't just good or bad, Emma. They're both and everything in between. What matters is the choices we make. Emma seemed to consider this. I choose to be good. Then you will be. That afternoon, Madison received another unexpected visitor. Jackson Cole. He looked older, worn, but his eyes were clear. I'm not here to cause trouble, he said immediately. I'm leaving the country, starting over. I just needed to see that you were okay. They sat on a bench while Emma played nearby. You look good, he said. Happy. We are. I testified, Jackson said, in all the trials. Helped put away everyone connected to William Blake's organization. It's done, Madison, really done. Thank you. They sat in silence, watching Emma laugh with other children. I loved you, Jackson said quietly. Still do, but I know that doesn't matter anymore. It matters, Madison said. It just doesn't change anything. Jackson stood to leave, then turned back. She's beautiful. Looks just like you. Madison smiled sadly. They both knew Emma looked like Ryan, but she appreciated the lie. After he left, Madison pushed Emma on the swings, thinking about choices and consequences, about love and betrayal, about the price it paid for freedom. That night, as she tucked Emma into bed, her daughter asked, Mommy, are we safe? For the first time in 5 years, Madison could answer with complete honesty. Yes, baby, we're safe. The auditorium was packed for the middle school science fair. Emma Winters, she'd chosen to take back the family name when she turned 13, stood beside her project on renewable energy, confident and brilliant. Madison watched from the audience, marveling at the young woman her daughter was becoming. Emma knew the truth now, and all of it. Madison had told her everything when she turned 13, believing she deserved to know where she came from. Emma had cried, raged, then ultimately understood. She chose to be nothing like her father, nothing like her aunt. She chose to be herself. First place goes to Emma Winters, Madison cheered with the other parents, tears in her eyes. They'd made it. Despite everything, they'd made it. After the ceremony, an elderly woman approached them. Madison recognized her immediately. Judge Catherine Wells, now retired. I've followed your story, the judge said quietly. I'm glad to see you both thriving. Thank you. Emma, the judge addressed the teenager, your mother is one of the bravest women I've ever met. Don't forget that. Emma hugged Madison tightly. I never do. As they drove home, Emma asked, Mom, do you ever regret any of it? Madison thought about Ryan, about the life she'd thought she'd have, about the innocence lost. I regret trusting the wrong people. I regret the pain. But you, never. You were worth everything. Emma smiled. Ryan's smile transformed into something pure and good. That night, Madison stood on her porch, looking at the stars. Somewhere out there, Victoria was buried in a prison cemetery. Ryan lay in an unmarked grave. Jackson was building a new life in Europe. The criminals were serving their sentences. And here she stood, survivor of a war that had nearly destroyed her, mother to a daughter who would never know that darkness. The past was done. The future stretched ahead, bright with possibility. Madison Winters had won, not by playing the game, but by changing it entirely. And in the end, that made all the difference.